And I do want to say that this is a game that I do own, and this game is also a perfect 10 for me, and I don't hand those out very often. I think the amount that they've accomplished with this game is just incredible. This is a hugely ambitious game, and the actual gameplay involved in this is a lot of fun, but I will also say it's probably not for everyone. This is a cooperative game, and it's also heavily focused on exploration and adventure, so if you want a lot of action, this might not be a game for you. And of course, it is a campaign game, so it does take up a lot of time. But I will also say it's the best campaign game that I've ever played because it doesn't fall into a lot of those issues that I find with other campaign games where I'm presented with different decisions and there just isn't a lot of information or clues indicating to me which one's going to hurt me and which one's going to harm me. And I just find that in a lot of campaign games, a lot of my decisions just end up feeling very random. And although that still can happen on occasion in this game, it happens infrequently enough that it feels more just part of the world. And usually you do know the outcomes in advance, and it's up to you to push your luck to try and get the outcome. Or if you're doing something a little bit more mysterious, it usually holds true that if you succeed in a check, it's going to be something good. Whereas if you fail, it could be something negative or nothing at all. This is a game that does reward you for exploring, so you might find new information or new clues and items that might help you discover the appropriate choices to make in the future or to make those future challenges a little bit easier. But before I get into exactly how this game plays, I'll just let you know a little bit more about the new content that's going to be added. And it's going to be adding a brand new threat or scenario into the game called the First Garden. And it's going to be taking the players to the highest, snowiest peaks of the collapsing lands, and there's going to be a whole new mountain region to explore along with a brand new dialogue book. There's going to be a bunch of new content and expansions that you'll also be able to mix into the game that you can play with this new threat, as well as the ones offered in the core box. And if you did miss out on that first campaign, this is a great opportunity to get your hands on this game because this one will be offering the original content. And that original content is going to be delivering very soon here with this upcoming November, whereas the new content is going to be delivering in November of 2025. But if you're not familiar with this game, this is a game that offers a bunch of different overarching campaigns that are all known as threats, and each of these are going to be broken into bite-sized chapters. These new scenarios are a lot more structured than the original threats that were offered in Seventh Continent, if you're familiar with their first iteration on the system. And there are quite a lot of changes with this version of the game, with this one being more focused on exploration and failing forward. And they've done a lot of work to make this one a lot less punishing if you end up failing in one of the scenarios, whereas in the original Seventh Continent, the rulebook instructed you to restart the whole threat, which most people, including myself, would just house rule that to something else, like just losing some of your items or resetting back to a earlier point, because you put a lot of time into this and you don't really want to start back to zero, especially once a lot of those surprises have already been discovered and are still fresh in your mind. This one also makes the game a lot less grindy, where players aren't constantly trying to hunt or fish in order to get more cards back into their deck. And this one does that by introducing a component that players are going to be using to track their health, and this normally does get reset every time you return back to your home camp in between each of the chapters. And players will end up in situations where they're going to be taking some damage and losing health, but players can also just choose to give up some of their health by pushing themselves a little bit further, which in turn gets them more cards back into their deck. What's really neat about this is that there might be other events that you'll run into throughout the game that have a different outcome because you are of low health, or you might have to turn down a really risky but rewarding option because you need to focus on surviving. So I really like that that punishment is still there, but it's done in a way that isn't completely aggravating. That being said, I really did love Seventh Continent as well, but I will say that I cheated quite a bit because I was not a big fan of that whole reset mechanism. This will probably make a lot more sense if I actually explain the game, because this is a game where players are exploring a map that's going to be made up of a bunch of different cards. The cards are all going to be organized in these different organizers here, and depending on the card you're on and the point of interest that you're interacting with, whether it's something specific on that card, or if you're planning to move to an adjacent card, it's going to have a number on it indicating to you which card you need to draw in order to resolve that action. Most actions in the game do come at a cost, and the way that this works is that each player is going to have their own character as well as their own deck of cards that they'll be able to manage throughout the game, adding and removing cards from that that deck as the game goes on. And these cards can have a bunch of different abilities and effects, but the main purpose of these cards is these stars and icons located on the left-hand side of the cards. The reason for this is that each of the actions will have some amount of cards that you either have to draw or that you're limited to drawing, and then there's going to be a number of stars that you're trying to achieve by drawing that amount of cards in order for it to be a success. When you succeed, there's going to be an outcome for that, and when you fail, there's going to be a different, usually more negative outcome for that. But this game is all centered around Push Your Luck, which is one of my favorite mechanisms, and the way that it's incorporated is that this deck of cards also functions as your health or energy, so you're going to want to try and draw as few cards as possible, but still manage to get a success. You will get familiar with your deck, and you'll also know some cards that you may have drawn already and what might be left in your deck, indicating to you how easy or difficult it might be to get a success. But like I said, these cards do also have different abilities associated with them, and normally whenever you're drawing cards in order to try and get those stars for a success, you're usually allowed to then keep one of those cards instead of putting it straight into your discard pile, and then you'll be able to use the ability of that card on one of your future actions. Not only that, but players can also get different items that can help them with actions, and what's really neat about all these different cards and items is that everything is connected by different icons, and you're going to be trying to match up iconography to indicate whether or not you can use a weapon or item for a particular task. For example, you could find yourself with just a long pole that you could use as a weapon, but you can also use it to balance any time that you're trying to do something a little bit more nimble. This is great for the cooperative aspect in the game because one player could specialize in fighting while someone else specializes with other actions, but you're not completely tied into that because you can lose these items at any moment, so players will constantly be in flux with the different options that are available to them, kind of changing up their gear set and specialties as the game plays out. A cool change with 7th Citadel that wasn't offered in 7th Continent is that there is a dialogue book and there's actually other people in the world that you can interact with. And I really did like the emptiness and feeling of being alone on 7th Continent, but this one just offers something a lot different from that. Like I said, players are going to be able to choose a threat and then play through the several chapters that that threat has to offer, but what's really neat about this is that there are branching paths depending on your decisions and successes, and also in between each threat, you're going to be coming back to your settlement. When you're at your settlement, you can actually use different cards that you found out on your adventure in order to level up a skill tree, gain new cards, build buildings that can help you in the future, improve the different stats of your settlement, which do help you with other actions and gaining influence in the overall world. But something that's really cool is that players also have this map that roughly outlines the collapsing land because everything on this map isn't exactly accurate. But when you return to your settlement, you can actually send out different troops in order to scout different areas of the map. And then when they come back, they're going to be bringing you a card that you actually slot into the front of this map. And it's going to be replacing that portion of the map with a more up-to-date, detailed version of that area. This can give players all sorts of different clues of what they could find there or where they might want to explore when they're in that area, but it can also present players with additional dialogue choices and options as they're playing throughout the game. Like I said, I absolutely love this game, so naturally this one is also my pick of the week, but I already did make this one my pick back when it originally launched, so it's just still my pick of the week. I'm really excited to see what the new content is going to be adding into the game, and I will say that I've only played through probably about 90% of the first threat. I'm hoping to finish that off really soon, and if I wasn't filming this, I'd probably be playing this game right now, but my only concern with this game that I haven't completely validated just yet is how much overlap there's going to be between the various threats. Because it is just a single map, you might end up in the same areas over and over again, but I do know that there's a lot of map left for me to explore, so I'm sure the other threats will probably force me in those directions in one way or another, possibly moving my settlement. I'm not quite sure, but I do have faith based on everything I've seen with this game already and the team that's behind it, because like I said, they've done a fantastic job. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description down below.